corruption, one of the most serious challenges facing South Africa. It's deeply affected government institutions, drained public resources, and eroded trust in leadership. From local municipalities to national state-owned enterprises, corruption has contributed to service delivery failures, economic decline, and really growing public frustration. So while efforts, including the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, have exposed the extent of state capture, real accountability has been slow, and the struggle to clean up the system continues. Let's bring in Corruption Watch's consultant, Karam Singh. Karam, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. And even as I'm reading that introduction, and I'm sure our viewers feel it too, and people who have been tracking the story of decades of corruption, people who have felt the impact of a lack of service delivery, people living in those sewer-infested neighborhoods where the cleanup, the literal cleanup has been slow to happen. We're tired, aren't we, of the story of corruption, particularly because there just doesn't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel. Or am I being dramatic?
Good morning, Michelle. I don't think you're being dramatic. I think the frustration that you've expressed there is a frustration felt by everybody in the country. With the dawn of democracy in 1994 and the movement away from the atrocities of apartheid, there was a great promise that democracy and a constitutional democracy would deliver tangible outcomes in terms of economic growth, in terms of addressing inequality, in terms of the provision of socioeconomic rights and civil and political rights. And we're not a failed state. There has been some progress, but corruption really is a real impediment to realizing the type of future that we had all hoped for all the reasons that you said. And I think the concern really is that, despite all the efforts placed into the Zondo Commission, the work of the National Advisory Council against corruption, and commitments from senior leadership across the board, we're just not seeing that breakthrough, that progress that can give people confidence that the country's going in the right direction and that we're reversing this negative trajectory.
Because on paper, we are doing what we can, right? We have commissions of inquiry. We've heard from the SIU this week about corruption at Tembisa Hospital amounting to just an eye-watering 2 billion rand over a period of time. So on paper, we are doing the things that we need to do, Karam. It's the follow-through that is lacking.
Yes, it's the follow-through. I mean, I don't know that we are doing all the things that we're meant to do. I mean, I think there's a real concern that political will is variable, that we have commissions of inquiry, we have committees, we have the right structures in place that give us findings, that give us recommendations, but then they're handed off into an amorphous space where they're not actioned, So this challenge we have that we've continually had around a fractured approach to the institutional response to the fight against corruption. One body does detection, one body does investigation, another body does prosecution. Whenever there's those kind of handoffs within the criminal justice system, we see real challenges. We went through years of dealing with the issue of state capture without ever addressing the Achilles heel, which is the police. All of the Zondo findings and recommendations had to go somewhere. They had to go to the police. And now we're dealing with a new commission of inquiry because the allegations are that investigations have been politically frustrated, that the police don't have the right skills and the capacity, that we have a dysfunctional crime intelligence. Well, these are issues which should have been dealt with in the context of the Zondo Commission, and to then kick the can down the road and deal with them now, again, gives us this sense of inertia, this sense that we're not progressing, that we're not getting to that stage of real accountability.
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to the terms of reference of an inquiry, right? Because even for the Madlanga Commission sitting now, how far back do we go in the story of police corruption and the infiltration of criminals into the SAPS and into investigations? So what inquiries usually do is that they ring fence what it is that they are able to investigate, or else, where does it end?
Yeah, I mean, how you draw these terms of reference is absolutely critical. I mean, I'm always struck by the comment that Judge Zondo made that his commission only investigated about 10% of the allegations that were brought to its attention. So what happened to that other 90%? You know, the Zondo Commission didn't go into the challenges that we face at municipalities. So these issues now we're seeing in the city of Cape Town wouldn't have come before the Zondo Commission. So, you know, the terms of reference, how far back we go is absolutely critical. But I suppose we have to, you know, find that balance between how far back we go and what's our future course. You know, where are we going? What are our goals? So if we look at the recommendations from the National Advisory Council Against Corruption, they talk about the establishment of a new anti-corruption agency. There's also the private members bill that's been put forth by Glenis Breitenbach on this issue. You know, we're not even at the stage where these matters are being properly debated before Parliament. They're still at the level of recommendations and proposals. The idea that that will then have to go through Parliament and then a new institution would be created. Again, we're talking about another 5-6 year time gap. This was the challenge that we sat with on the issue of procurement reform. We had almost, you know, over 10 years of debate around what's required to fix the public procurement system. We know that's where the big corruption is taking place. We have a new act, and that act is now subject to various challenges in front of the court. You know, from the standpoint of civil society, that act didn't go far enough in terms of ensuring that there's real transparency throughout the whole public procurement process to ensure that it can be properly monitored and that when there's irregular procurement, that it's detected and that it's dealt with before the money's stolen. So, you know, we're in this situation where we're continually reactive, where we put forth viable proposals and recommendations, but then we don't have the political will to drive it. We don't have the political will to really clean up the system. And the fact that we sit with implicated persons from the era of state capture within cabinet and other cabinet officials that are implicated in new corruption scandals just speaks to the real lack of political will to decisively deal with corruption.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that so much of the corruption in South Africa happens at local government level. Today, Deputy President Paul Mashatile is on what he's calling a working visit in Qunu in the Eastern Cape, and it's around service delivery issues. There is a sense, Karam, and this is obviously building up to the local government elections next year, that government, and perhaps the ANC in particular, is floundering and trying to signal in some way that it is yet again doing something. And perhaps the message at the end of the day is, give us another chance and vote for us next election.
You know, I don't want to venture into the space of politics to say what the electorate should do, but the electorate needs to look really, really closely at the track record of those that seek to come back into power, and then what other kinds of alternatives are being put forth by other political parties to say that we're dedicated to clean governance, we're dedicated to a zero tolerance approach, and that if you vote for us, you can be assured that there won't be corruption. So I think local government elections are going to be hotly contested. The ANC lost a significant majority in national elections last year, and I don't think the ANC has done enough to win back the confidence of the public to reverse that slide. So yeah, I think local government is going to be the next stage that we see this kind of contestation. But I think voters are going to be right to be skeptical and are going to have to really be absolutely critical and well informed in terms of how they exercise their vote and who they seek to put back, into these positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we already saw that with last year's election results in the national election, the ANC falling by a staggering 17%, which, even though the predictions had been made, I think shocked many people who were watching the elections and had a vested interest in it, not least of which the ANC itself. Karam, how do we match up with sort of countries that have a similar history of a democratic government coming in, and 30 years later, this is where we are?
I think the story is not a great story. I think if we look at the post-colonial era, there are many other examples of liberation parties that rode a wave of public support on the back of a democratic struggle, who a decade, 2 decades into their power, found themselves being deeply compromised and deeply corrupt. This happened in Kenya. This happened in India. It's happened in a lot of other similarly placed emerging democracies. Corruption is not something that's just in emerging democracies. We're seeing increasing corruption in other kinds of in Western democracies. I think what's unfolding before our eyes in terms of what's happening in the United States is unbelievably appalling on issues of accountability and transparency. South Africa is stagnating in its fight against corruption, but unfortunately, that is the global trend. There are very few shining lights, shining examples of countries that are taking a zero tolerance approach and that are mobilizing their resources, their enforcement energies to really combating corruption. So South Africa finds itself in bad company, and unfortunately, this is where we are globally at this stage in terms of the democratic journey and the a kind of coherent response to illicit activities, criminal activities, and crime and corruption.
Karam Singh, as always, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for giving us that context, as worrying as it is. Karam Singh is a consultant with Corruption Watch.